Hey, this is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but it's kind of a very big topic for me, so I wasn't. I wanted to make sure I kind of included as much as I could. Basically, I want to talk about what it was like being a trans guy and going to a private girls' school. Obviously, at the time, I didn't explicitly know I was trans, but I mean, there was signs of it through my childhood, and during my childhood, I was at a private girls' school. I actually went to that school from kindergarten to year 10, so that was the only kind of experience in school that I had until I was about 15 years old. And there are lots of elements of it that both affected me now and were very unique for someone who is trans male. I mean, the first most obvious aspect of it was the uniform. It was like a one-piece thin dress thing, and I mean, as a kid, I essentially, not even essentially, I literally would refuse to wear dresses at all, and having to wear one every day for years, I think I just kind of adjusted to it. I mean, it became something that was just part of my everyday. But it's interesting because whenever I have dreams about school, I've been to 3 different schools, but whenever I have dreams about school, it's literally always about this school, the private girls' school. And I think that's, because I went there for 10 years of my life. It's just kind of your memories coming back up in your dreams. But when I'm in those dreams and I'm wearing the uniform, or even if I'm just at the school, there is very much a feeling of not belonging there. Even though I went there, it's like I'm coming back to somewhere that's familiar to me, but I'm on the outside of it. And when I'm in the dream wearing the uniform, it's obvious. I feel like, I'm cross-dressing, which is interesting because I didn't completely feel that way when I did actually go there and when I was wearing the uniform. But I mean, it's obvious that it's different because I'm post-transition now and I'm more aware of my identity and things like that. But it just kind of got me thinking of, like, if, for example, I was to be back there now, or even if I was to be back there a couple of years ago at the end of my schooling, that discomfort and that feeling of not belonging there, I think, would have been exemplified so much more. And I definitely don't think I would be able to handle it wearing that uniform. There was also a swimming uniform that I remember. I would always try to avoid swimming because, well, I didn't like it that much, but also it was the uniform. I mean, it was like a one-piece swimsuit, and it cut up really high on the legs, and you could see you could see everyone's figure, because it was just like a thin uniform, and I felt completely self-conscious and uncomfortable. I think they were like board shorts that you're technically allowed to buy, but I had literally never seen anybody wear them in the 10 years that I was there. So I felt too uncomfortable to be the only one wearing something different. I mean, that was another thing that I kind of had to just deal with, but as time went on, definitely my discomfort with that increased more and more. So being at an all-girls school and being surrounded by all these girls who were, as I believe, all heterosexual, or at least 99% of them, there were a lot of periods of time where I felt like I needed to kind of fit in that environment more than I did. When I was younger, in the very young primary school days, I had some friends who kind of shared more interest with me than a lot of the other people there. I had there were 3 or so people who were kind of a bit more I wouldn't even say tomboyish because they weren't to that extent, but I mean, like, you know, they weren't as stereotypically feminine, and like that was really nice. But then they all kind of grew out of that, and I didn't. I mean, I noticed differences between myself and all the other girls there, you know, in stereotypical ways, you know, it's like the activities we enjoyed, or the color of our lunch boxes, or, you know, the clothes that we wore. But, I mean, I felt very uncomfortable in the way that I dressed compared to everybody else just because it was different, and because I had been made fun of it before, as I mentioned in one of the other videos. And that was something that I wasn't really ever comfortable with while I was there. The more subtle or stereotypical differences outside of my clothing and my haircut, I stopped caring about because I realized that, you know, they're small and they don't really matter. But it was sometimes an issue just because I didn't have much in common with people on that level. But as well as feeling, you know, noticing differences between myself and others in stereotypical things, there was also a more subconscious part to it. Like, I remember, because we would have to get changed kind of just in our classroom or in like a communal change room, and I remember feeling like, you know, I was intruding almost, like I always kind of kept my head down and changed and tried to keep to myself in those situations. Not that I was looking at them inappropriately, but I just felt like it was inappropriate at all that I was there, because I felt this kind of separation somehow. And I later attributed that to my sexuality because, you know, I'm primarily interested in women, but I don't think it was a sexuality thing, because it wasn't as if I had to watch myself because I was attracted to all of them at all. It was just, I just felt like it was the polite thing to do. And I think that is kind of, like I said, subconsciously, like that socialization rule of, you know, men and women not being in each other's like private spaces kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, being at that school, it definitely helped me to recognize that I was different in some way to all the other girls I know. You know, it wasn't just, you know, it wasn't just certain girls, it was all girls in general that I felt different to. I did displace that onto my sexuality though, as I said, because when I realized that I liked women, I thought that was why I felt different, because I was more masculine and because I had like a different lifestyle to them or whatever. So that, you know, that made sense for a while, because, you know, I only had heterosexual girls to compare myself to. Of course I felt different to them, but I mean, obviously that it wasn't as simple as that. There was a lot of pressure to be ladylike at that school as well. It wasn't just that I was surrounded by women, but they, you know, you were actively taught to be ladylike. You weren't allowed certain haircuts, and you were taught to sit in a certain way and speak in a certain way. I mean, we didn't have like separate classes on it or anything, but, you know, they would kind of make sure to remind you to behave in a certain way. So, I mean, that obviously made me feel uncomfortable as well, because it wasn't my natural kind of behavior. But at the same time, I think some of the things that I was taught, and I think that they are still with me now. I mean, it was a religious school as well, so I think I retained a lot of conservative behaviors. I mean, just even little things like the way I sit, or the way I speak to people, or the way I am in public, like just little things like that. I think I got that behavior partially from my personality, but partially also from that school. So with the whole displacing onto my sexuality thing, I noticed that I was getting crushes on other girls, but at the time I didn't realize they were crushes. I thought that I just kind of, you know, appreciated them or whatever, or just liked them more than some of the other people that I knew. But It wasn't until about 14 years old that I realized that, those feelings, or those, ways that I thought of people was beyond a platonic thing. I mean, I would only realize if I would talk to one of my friends about it or something, and they were, they weren't judgmental or anything, which I really appreciate, but it kind of became clear to me that it was, a crush. And at first I thought that this was happening because I didn't know any guys. I mean, the only guys that I knew were, like, my family. So I thought maybe I was getting crushes on girls because I only knew girls. So I think I kind of almost forced myself to have crushes on guys just to try and prove to myself that I could. But the crushes that I had on guys definitely weren't anywhere near as genuine or as intense as the ones that I got on girls. I didn't really come to terms with that until I actually moved to another school overseas and met a whole bunch of new people, and I went to a public school there actually, and it was obvious to me that, my sexuality wasn't because I didn't know any guys. It was just, that's how it was. When I went to this new school overseas, I did become a lot more comfortable with my sexuality and my expression, the way that I dressed or the way that I acted or my hairstyle or the things that I liked. I became a lot more comfortable with those things because the people I knew, the people I met there were a lot more diverse, and I met a lot more people who were similar to me, and I found this newfound comfort in not having to be feminine and with being gay at the time. And that was something that I think was really important for me to experience because it helped me later on to reason with myself that my thinking that I was trans wasn't just because I wanted to be more masculine or dress in boys' clothing or have a short haircut, because those were things that I was already able to do and I was already comfortable doing, but there was still something missing. There was still a bigger problem. When I came back, because that was the school that I went to in Montreal, when I came back, I returned to that private school that I went to before, and I felt even more of a separation between myself and the other people there. And I still just assumed it was because of my sexuality, and especially after that time of becoming more comfortable with being myself and not trying to be more feminine, to be more like the other people at my school. I just, I felt super different, and I've still felt very on the outside. People at that point then knew about my sexuality because I had a girlfriend, and because there was an incident where I had a falling out with a friend of mine, and she decided that she would tell other people while I was overseas, which at the time I was very upset about, but now it's not something that bothers me anyway. But because of that, people then knew that I wasn't straight. And unfortunately, being gay was quite a taboo at a private religious school. Thankfully, quite a lot of people weren't bothered by it, but I also didn't talk about it that much, so, I couldn't really completely gauge what they thought of it. But there were some people who were bothered by it, or weirded out by it, and then kind of didn't talk to me anymore. And there were also people in, like, the grade below me that knew and would kind of give me strange looks, and I didn't realize that it was for that reason until one of them came and talked to me about it, because they were kind of questioning their sexuality, and I didn't realize that other people outside of my people in my grade knew until this person came up and knew. But I mean, I kind of just became like the gay kid. So I mean, I wasn't embarrassed by it because I knew that I wasn't doing anything wrong, but at the same time, it's not good to feel singled out like that. I ended up changing school after 6 months of being back at that school for the reasons that I mentioned, and I gotta say, I've definitely felt so much more comfortable. I mean, just even simple stuff like I was allowed to wear, it was a public school, so I was allowed to wear a boys' uniform, which was like a relief to me. I mean, I went the first like 2 days wearing the girls' uniforms. I thought that I had to, and then after I realized, like, it was just so good to be able to wear what I was comfortable with. They just had so many more subjects because it wasn't limited to like girls. Like, I didn't think that it would make that much of a difference, but it really, they do consider a wider diversity of people. And for the first time since I was at that school in Montreal, I met some more people who were gay, and I made a lot of friends with guys as well, because I found that I had a lot more in common with them than the girls at my previous school. And it was just good to be in that environment where they were actually people that I had things in common with and could be comfortable with being myself. I mean, I think there was a definite effect of being surrounded by heterosexual girls at a Christian school for 10 years. I mean, I think even in things like my mannerisms as well are probably more feminine than they would have been if I just went to a public school. But that kind of thing I can't really be too upset about. I mean, it's a little bit saddening sometimes because I feel like I'm less masculine than other guys, or that I get perceived in a certain way because I'm not as macho. But I mean, it's not really something that I can get upset about at this point, because I mean, that's just how I grew up and I can't really change that. And I have to remember that it doesn't make me not male. Even if it makes me not as macho, it doesn't make me not male. I think though, growing up in that environment, I have a much greater comfort with women than I would have going to a public school. Even now, I'm not as comfortable with guys as I am with girls, just because I'm just used to being around girls, and I feel like it's not very difficult for me to talk to them, even if we don't have much in common. I mean, I don't feel intimidated by them in the same way that I do around a lot of guys. Like, not all guys, but just in general, I'm not as used to being around them. The last thing I want to talk about is people who went to that school with me, what their opinion of my transition is like. And I don't talk to a lot of people who I went to that school with, but I talk to some of them. The ones who I was closer with are accepting of my transition. And even though some of them don't necessarily know that much about it or understand it completely, they're very open to learning about it. And the bottom line for them, for me, is that I'm happy that you're being yourself. So that was something that was kind of important to me, just because I had been close to these people, and I would hope that they wouldn't kind of judge me just for, being myself. So I really did appreciate that, and it was good to not have people in my past who were gonna disconnect from me immediately. And there are some people who I wasn't as immediately close with, in the way that I just didn't talk to them that much, and I've had some of them like comment on a link or something that I've posted, and leaving very positive comments, and that's something that kind of surprised me, but I was really happy about. It's good to know that just because someone went to a conservative school, they can still be open-minded. Sometimes I run into people who I went to school with who I barely talk to at all, and I have no idea what they think of my transition, because I never really brought it up or spoken to them about it. But I mean, surely they must notice a difference, but it's hard for me to know what they think. I hope that they don't think badly of it, but at the same time, if they're not that much a part of my life, I guess it's not something that I should really worry about. Actually, recently I ran into one of them, and they didn't, I was wearing sunglasses, and they didn't recognize me until I kind of took my sunglasses off and was like, hey, it's me. So that was kind of cool, and it shows to me that I really am different now. But again, I do wonder what they think. I mean, they just talked to me and they were nice and all, so I mean, obviously they didn't think that badly of it, that they were like walked away or anything, but it's still something I wonder about, and in a way I kind of want them to see me now just so that they kind of can see who I really am. But that's pretty much all I can fit into this video, I think, even though I'm sure it's already extremely long, so good on you if you've watched it all. But I thought it was something that was important for me to talk about because I think it's kind of a unique experience for a trans person. So I'll see you next video. Bye.